Welcome back to Stories in AI. Today we are talking to Dr. Severence MacLaughlin. He is a founder and managing partner at DeLorean Artificial Intelligence. He's also a top-ranked data scientist in healthcare and life sciences. And what's really unique about him is his balanced perspectives across the science of data science and the approach to practical and pragmatic applied AI. He has delivered billions of dollars for organizations, small and large, by using artificial intelligence and machine learning to transform their business processes. We talk about a lot of stuff. We talked about how 65% and why 65% of all AI projects never deliver positive ROI. We talked about the challenges in productizing AI. And more importantly, we talked about healthcare and how AI now provides an opportunity to put the patient experience and the patient in the center of everything that happens across pharma, providers, and payers. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. Severance, welcome to Stories in AI. It's great to have you here today.
Ganesh, thank you so much. Anytime I get to speak about my favorite subject, it's always a good thing, especially with a colleague. And we need more of this, man.
I agree. And I think when was the last time we met? It was probably 2018. We've been in circles, but you were at Cognizant and you had wonderful different journeys afterwards.
Yeah. It was 18, I think. I was heading up Cognizant's AI for healthcare and life sciences.
That's right.
And we had a number of conversations, and then I went on to Capgemini, and then now I lead DeLorean AI. So it's been good. And you had a similar road,
I did. Like after Cognitive Scale, helped co-found a company called Molecular. It's an ML feature store. Ended up doing a bunch of consulting and investing work afterwards, did some projects. I now work with a company called Beyond Minds AI, also trying to solve the enterprise AI problem. They're headquartered in Tel Aviv with offices in New York and London as well. So, welcome to the show again, and thanks again for doing this. Now, one thing I really love about your background is you have a perfect blend of the science. You're a PhD, you have some deep expertise in the science side of things, yet you're one of the biggest advocates I've met of applied AI, of actually putting AI into practice. How did you get into AI? Give us your story, give us a history. What attracted you here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I could tell you that I actually drew the roadmap. I'm a planner, right? In 5 years, we're going to do this. There's a Hebrew saying that says, man plans and God laughs. So I think it came back with my love of data. And when I was doing my PhD in physiology, I was the stats guy. And we were actually hard programming, this is DOS, doing longitudinal analyses on a mainframe, literally on a mainframe that was wired over to the library. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, we can use this. Why can't business use this to make better decisions? And so I started working for a science company, got brought back to the United States, and they were unfortunately backed by a company that went under during the crash of '08, and then went to work for a consulting firm and as a consultant, and then they let me, they were very nice people, form the strategic analytics practice back in 2009. And it just evolved, right? We had the big data revolution, and data programming and data science was just in its infancy. And then 2015, between those two dates, I was applying statistics or data science to companies, biopharm and hospitals. Mm-hmm. And then Cognizant came knocking to take over my little company. And we had a great time there. I led their global AI and data science for healthcare, so the payer, provider, government, pharmacy, and life sciences, pharma, biotech, medical device. And then Capgemini came knocking and asked me to head their AI for the Western Hemisphere for all verticals, and which was unbelievable and a great opportunity, again, working in other countries, Mexico, Chile, Canada, and seeing that, and seeing some of the universities in Latin America that are producing some pretty damn good data scientists, like Guadalajara, mm-hmm. or the University of Buenos Aires. And maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later. Now it's the near shore. There's an opportunity to use our Latin American counterparts as data scientists versus only in India or offshore. And then and I decided I didn't want to do slideware anymore, Ganesh. Selling, hey, we can do this. I wanted to build a product, an AI product, and actually show people like, hey, it works. Do you want to buy it? And then we came up with what we call AI as a service. So it's and the investors love that. They don't like the implementation. So
of course,
so yeah, that's my road. So yeah.
It's funny you say an AI and product, and the reality of the market. It's a hard problem, and I personally have felt it and stuff. How are you guys going about it? I mean, are you picking a domain, picking a problem, picking a vertical? Are you going narrow? Are you going broad? Just give us a sense of how you're building the product and some associated challenges with it.
So we currently have 5.5 products. So we've got 5 that are tested and 1 that's in production or an R&D. And we started this, and I said to my friend, I had my box of crazy ideas that no one at Capgemini or Cognizant liked, and that they solved a specific problem, right, for the business. And I thought there was an ROI. So I said to my friend, Richie Eteru, which you should get on the show. He's the CEO of Humanity.co and then Beam.co. And he's like, I want to do healthcare because that's what I do. And he's like, no, Seth, that takes too long. You got to get a product that like is there. So we started our first product, customer relations management AI. So it's an AI that sits on top of any CRM platform. So Salesforce, Pega, Microsoft Dynamics, SAP. And we built it, and it can predict if a deal will win or not. And then if it won't win, what's the next best action? So sounds good, But what I found, the challenge, Ganesh, is there was no sales data out to buy to build the prototype. So I had to beg, nobody's going to sell their sales data, which I should have known. And so I had to go beg, borrow, and steal from friends that own companies to start this. So then we get there, and the next problem, which turned out to be a good thing, is when you export data from SFDC or SAP, you get like a CSV file or Excel. But that's not all the data. Our back end that we had to build is like a vacuum cleaner that sucks all the data out. And it turns out that's one of the most valuable parts of our IP. So there's a lot of challenges, but like once you get it going and it's working, I think the benefit is that you put the money in R&D, right? So instead of the systems integrators charging you like $100,000 or $1 million to do this for a Fortune 500, we've lowered the cost so you can actually put the block in the product and connect it at a lower cost of entry so more companies can get in. So
interesting. No, it's a productization in AI. One of the challenges that I wrote about this for VentureBeat early this year. I mean, I found like 4 different things that were, really stopping the scaling problem or challenging the scaling approach with AI in enterprises. And one of them was actually the heavy need for customization for solving specific problems, customer to customer, problem to problem, industry to industry. So, it's interesting, the approach you're taking through. You are building, and I'm assuming the product itself is an accelerator, and then you actually build or customize on top of it for specific customer opportunities and customer problems.
Yeah, and they range in difficulty, right? Like our CRM AI, because we're pre-built, we're interoperable with Salesforce and SAP. That one's plug and play. We have a medical one, which we call real-time medical care management AI, and we've partnered with Teradata, and then also a company called Lumiana, and they standardize the data first for Teradata Advantage. So again, plug and play. But then we have one called Customer 360, which is highly customizable, and Wall Street doesn't like that, right? They want to. Yep. But the other thing I think that's one of the problems, at least not only scaling, but for these AI companies, these unicorns, these babies, is they're getting acquired so fast, and I think there's a challenge there because, great for the founders, right? And they think that the big mother goose may be Cognizant or SAP or Microsoft. But those big companies have challenges with innovation. So, when the integration of one of these smaller companies that, at Cognizant, we used to call it cognified, right? They can't be as innovative as they wanted to be or make the decisions. So I think that's another challenge is that ability to be a speedboat versus a tanker.
Speedboat versus a tanker. So, I know you guys published some research at DeLorean Artificial Intelligence Research showing 60% of the C-suite will spend on AI, but 65% of all the projects also fail or don't generate a positive ROI. Right?
Yeah.
What are you seeing there? I mean, how are CEOs and business leaders spending? Why are they spending? And then why are they not seeing the ROI?
Again, good question. I think if everybody knew the answer, we'd be in a different spot. But my opinion from, and I think you're in the same area, is that we've been down this road for so long. In 2015 or 16, when I was at Cognizant, and it would take 5 meetings with a VP or a C-level to get them just to be like, okay, maybe I'll spend a little bit of money. Well, we're past that now. We're at the point where CEOs know they need artificial intelligence. 60%, and have responded by saying that. And they've earmarked dollars, which makes it a lot easier to actually implement because they've budgeted it, right? The problem is that 65% are failing. And why are they failing I believe, is that they don't know where to put their money. And what they do is they do these little science projects all around the company. So maybe marketing has one, sales has one, supply chain, manufacturing, and they put $100,000 or $50,000. And what happens is that they may be beneficial if they succeed, but may be beneficial for that silo, but there's no way to scale that across the enterprise without that vision. So I think that's where the failure mark is. And I'm working with a large Fortune 500 globally in the CPG, and Grupo Bimbo, and their chief transformation officer, Raul Obregon, he had a vision, and he's like, we need to lay the foundation for our data first before we can do the fun stuff with AI, and we have to have a global vision. So if this is going to be working for the U.S., it also has to work for the U.K. And of course, you're going to say, well, not everything is the same, but yeah, you need to modify it a little bit. But having that vision that we're going to put our money in the right spot, but also having the vision like, okay, we're going to put AI where it drives revenue, top line sales, or decreasing your bottom line expenses. And I think the Grupo Bimbo or Raul Obregon's vision is the right way as a C-level to do that.
Interesting. Now, you've been in healthcare, and I followed some of the work you did there. So there is the pharma, the providers, and the payers, and everybody's doing AI right now. But I always wonder, where's the patient? I mean, you have all these different, I know everybody's trying to serve the patient, but are we forgetting the patient in the midst of all the efforts happening around?
Yeah, you're touching on some topics that I have quite a bit of opinions on. So I think, first of all, and I wrote an article about healthcare and AI, a flirtation with success. So I've been hearing that AI is going to change healthcare since 14, 15, 16. Sure. And I did a review this year. I'm like, what have you done, right? And so the only things I can show is there's some really great stuff with AI and computer vision. That Philips got a first 510K approval from FDA. Huge, great stuff. Heart rate monitoring versus IoT. Great stuff. But nothing, like you said, for the patient. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Well, number one is the payer, the insurance company in the United States, has all the data, not the provider. So the provider is this one little guy that's out there. Maybe he's a hospital group. So one, they can't afford the AI at some point. Number two is their data size is so small versus a payer like United Health Group has 40 million members, right? You multiply that by whatever, and remember all the data attributes for how many years. That's a serious data storage.
That is.
But the insurance companies they've been doing stuff in claims, like for dollar amount, right? Like, you do a BPO with a systems integrator, how do you decrease your cost? Which is good, but they haven't put any money into actually mathematically modeling the patient journey or the disease progression. And like this is really apropos for COVID-19. I'm shaking a Starbucks thing at you. And COVID-19, they said, oh, there's going to be 200 million deaths, or like whatever epidemiologist that said that needed to go away. But the reason is the CDC and the health department has no data. They have no connections, right? The doctors don't. The data is captured, at least in the U.S., in the payers. Now, you can't make the same excuse for National Health Services in Britain, but they don't have the infrastructure to do that. Sure. So I wonder what it would have been like if we had that data ready and available, to get, so we know what the right treatment for COVID would have been at the right stage.
No, I agree. You're talking data, and one of the things I've heard you actually talk about this in one of your speeches, I think, is the the end-to-end data value chain across these constituents, right?
Yeah.
Elaborate a little bit more on that. Like, so how critical is this data, and what is that data value chain?
So again, you've been in this with companies too, is that, you go into a company and you're always talking to IT. And the business wants to use the data to make better decisions. And usually IT gives them some type of BI that the IT thinks they need. Well, IT shouldn't be making decisions about what the business needs, right? It should be the other way around, and IT should see themselves as a service organization. And what we started doing is that we started talking to the business, seeing what you needed, and we're tracing back. Again, this is over years of figuring this out, like the different steps you had to go back to get to the original source that they need to, and then you work this way back to the business to get it into a highly digestible format. So we talk about data acquisition. So like, how do you acquire the data? May that be sales, may that be patient data. How do you actually store the data? How do you validate the data? How do you visualize the data? And then after that, you've got standard analytics, you've got advanced analytics. And not only until then do you have, then you can start doing AI, right? Because there's value with regular analytics, there's value with advanced analytics. So crawl before you walk, walk before you run. But then the other part is, once you get down to this side and you've done it the right way with the business, with right visualizations, I can't tell you the value of interactive visualizations, for executives. So Power BI, Tableau, or I'm going to make this up, D3JS or 3DJS is my new favorite toy. So that the business can actually interact with that. And then what people forget about is data monetization, right? So the digital exhaust from these Fortune 500 companies, they can monetize. So, you have this data, anonymize it, and sell it. Nielsen would buy it, and you can use that for whatever you want, but you can actually monetize and turn that value chain, the cost associated with it, from a red figure on the balance sheet to a black one, and make some money in IT or data, or whatever the department is. But having that in control, you have to be in control, like scientific control of that, to be good.
Understood. No, it's actually fascinating you say that, right? I mean, it all comes down to the data, and I know not minimizing the amount of work you have to do in the data science itself, but then the source of truth, everything starts with the data, and just making sure you have the right one from the right sources. You validate it, you make sure it is what you're looking for, can be used for, you have the permissions to do it. The entire value chain around data is something that you have to look at. That's fascinating. Now, how, we were talking about Fortune 500 and stuff. So if I'm a Fortune 500 CEO or even a chief transformation officer looking at it, and I've embarked on some AI projects, what are the 3 things I need to do based on your experience that you would advise me on?
That's a good question. Number one is you need to have a person at the table, so the big boy table, the C table, that is responsible for this. So that could be your CIO, that could be your chief analytics officer, chief data officer, chief of AI, whatever that is. But there has to be a clear message from the top down that we are going to do this. And they have to have the intestinal fortitude, the guts, to actually mandate this, because if not, everybody's doing their own little thing around the world in their company, and it's not being accumulative, it's being a separate value. The second one is pick your projects correctly, right? And look at your revenue streams, look at your business, and if you're a businessman, you want to generate more sales. How do I do this? How do I sell more? How do I drive that revenue? Now, if you're an oil company, it might be like, how am I more efficient in finding the fields that we want to look at? How do we drill more efficiently and things of that nature? So understand that.
Or if you're Exxon, how do I actually move my revenue stream to sustainable sources from starting tomorrow, right?
Exactly. or using data to make those decisions, right?
Yep.
Like, should we be putting money into algae or to power or wind or whatnot? This concept was, I don't understand investment companies. I called it due diligence through data integrity. And you heard it here first, but when they do their due diligence, why isn't there a data due diligence, right? Like, I think there's going to be an error or emissions lawsuit at some point where, but if you do your data, you kind of have a roadmap and know the value of what you've got, right? And I think the last thing is that, this is going to be a long-term thing. This is not a quick fix. AI, we believe, is going to be about 10 to 15% of the IT budget. So IT is usually 2.5. So, and spend the money, right? And get good partners, right? You have to have the right environment for your data. You have to love your data. You have to acquire it. You have to give it a home. You have to put a hug around it, and then hire good people. Data people are expensive, but my father used to say, "Pay peanuts, get monkeys." So,
yep. Hug your data, hashtag. That's actually a really good one. Now, Severance, on that note, continuing that thread, right? Build versus buy. How should organizations approach that question with respect to AI?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a story from a health plan that I went to. And so I went in there and they told me they were building their own data lake. And that scared me. And I'm thinking to myself, why would you be doing that? It's like me building my own car. I don't need that. Like, this is a really good point that you bring up, and I've had this conversation. So when we started out in data sciences, it was in the consulting or the system integrators because there wasn't enough people that everybody had their own team. Mm-hmm. And this goes back to the CEO one. You have to have a data team. You have to have an AI and data science team. So what usually happens is the CEO says, I need one. So there's a CIO, and he says, we need a head of data. And they put someone in IT in charge of this who don't understand data science or AI, and then they hire the team. And that right there is the biggest mistake because they don't know who they're hiring. And depending on the team size, if you hire the wrong person, that could be a make or break. The other one is in hiring the right data scientists. I've done this now for 20 years, and you have to these programs that are at Columbia and Harvard for 6 weeks. That doesn't make a data scientist. You need to have work through these problems. You have to be a scientist. So that would be that part. In terms of build versus buy, there are your core business for a client is your core business. You make cars, make cars. If you make airplanes, make airplanes. If you make buns or bread, you make bread. You should. My advice is buy something that is reproducible with a good environment partnership company such as Microsoft, AWS, Teradata, and then also a good systems integrator. That's your triangle, right? Like environment, systems integrator, and then AI. Because you're going to save a lot of time, you're going to be a higher speed, and you're going to get ROI better.
One of the things that's really good advice. One of the things I always wonder, like COVID-19, if you look at what happened in 2020, the big guys, the FANG stocks, all of them fared really well because digitization, digital transformation really went out. But about 84% of small businesses almost went out of business. Some of them really did, right? How do you make this kind of capabilities, which requires products and system integration and capabilities and investments, how do you make it accessible for the smaller companies, the medium enterprises, the small businesses? What is the way out of this?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways, right? So in anything that starts, new, it starts more expensive, and we're getting cheaper. And with DeLorean, we put the money in, so the price of acquisition is lower, right? So we're getting to that point with AI as a service. Now, I'm not going to walk into a mom and pop store or 50 employee store and try to sell them something because I don't think that they could. But there is something I believe we're doing now is we're bringing in a consortium of, they're not small, they're medium sized, okay? And they're health plans that have maybe 1 million members, but they don't have enough members that have a certain disease set. Well, we found out that we can run the data on all of them, and we do a subscription basis, right? So you pay to see where you fall against your peers, and then you get the data. And so it's a joint, capability. So that's one thing. So if you're an industry standard. The other thing is when I was at Capgemini, we were talking about a international data consortium. So businesses that don't compete with one another, again, these might be larger, but this is where smaller ones could probably maybe buy in. Maybe an airline company, maybe a hotel company, a fast food or a restaurant, or maybe the industry group. And they don't compete with one another, but they have the same customer. So if they share the data, then we can get a 360 profile of that person. So that might be another one, but it's a good question. And then the last part I would say is you have to dip your foot or your toe in, right? Like anything you do better in upskilling. So maybe you do hire a data scientist, right? Or maybe you have an intern to start working on the data. Or, a company like Data Robot, it's not going to solve your problem, but it it accelerates your ability to get into this area.
Yeah.
Or I think Alpine Labs is another good company where they can drag some of your things. I mean, you would know actually better which ones, but there are access if you're savvy.
Yep. No, that's interesting. I had Ben Taylor from Data Robot on my show yesterday. So,
Yep.
the other thing is no, that's actually a good way of framing it, right? There is the democratization of the technology and the accessibility that's going to naturally happen. But then if you're savvy enough, there's all these different ways and interesting, even business models that you can just accelerate that transition. But I fundamentally believe that is needed because I worry about AI getting into having the 1% problem, concentrated among the big guys and not really having a lot of say in it. So I fundamentally believe personally that everybody, and part of this approach with Stories with AI is also how do you get more and more people into the fold, into shaping the market, shaping the industry, and so forth. So what, according to you, is the most critical piece of work happening in AI today?
Oh, I think it's more the work is so the definition of AI is what is that? And in my definition of AI is that it has the ability to predict something in the future. It has the ability to not only predict it, but give you next best action to actually intervene, right? And then sentience. So when I say sentience is the ability to think. Now, what we're talking about right now is the ability to think like a golden retriever or a chimp or like a 4-year-old, right? But it has the ability to say, I'm going to do this, right? It's not a fully acquired adult. That will probably be when you and I have gray beards, but it is coming, right? It is coming down that road, and the ability to build that neural network or that combination of data science tools together to do that is the most important. And the second one is the computing power that we're going to have. So NVIDIA is the main player there, but there's also Samba, which is coming up right behind them. So those industries have to grow for us also to get to that technological level. In terms of tools, computer vision is cool. Everybody loves computer vision. I have this sweet spot for audio sound recognition. I think people don't. Sound is really, really cool. We were doing a project at Capgemini with the windmills, and they're like, "Hey, we're sending drones out to look instead of people to see if they're damaged." And I was like, that's really cool. So you should, number one, be accredited that you made a good decision, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, they make different sounds when they're broken or that they're optimal. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, why don't you put little microphones? Where I was talking to someone in Ford, and I'm like, why don't you guys just put little vibration monitors on the car, and then that tells you if your timing belt does something, it's going to sound like this. If it's the carburetor, it's going to sound like that. I think audio sound recognition is kind of like the redheaded stepchild of data science tools, and I think it's probably.
I agree. That's awesome. Now, I got some rapid fire questions for you. Okay, so you got a quick answer. Don't think too much, right? Number one, give me an example of something you heard a decade ago and thought was completely ridiculous, but it's very commonplace or it's very possible today.
Video chats.
10 years ago. That's true. Okay. Give me a story of how we will be interacting with AI in 100 years.
Oh, I think we're going to be in, pick your movie. I'm going to get into a car and it's just going to drive itself. I'm going to I'm going to talk to my phone and say cook dinner, and maybe it'll even have Star Trek, the food replicator, so I don't have to cook anymore. That would be my favorite one. But
yes. So, we touched upon this and when you said sentience and stuff too, but we're going artificial general intelligence or AGI, right? Do you fear that? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's possible in our lifetime or even in the next 100 years?
I do think it's possible, and I think we should embrace it. I think so what we think AGI is, as data scientists or AI specialists, and what the general public and then people that just want to fan the flames, right, are two different things. So I think number one is education for the populace of what this does and what the benefit is. And I'm a big critic of AI ethics. My belief is that scientists are scientists, right? We do good work, we plan, we have a set of ethics. We don't need Molly, the soccer mom, to tell us what our ethics and how we do our thing is. And let us do what we need to do. And of course, there's always going to be bad apples anywhere. But I mean, for example, right? Amazon did a recruiting AI, right? And they wanted their best programmers. And so what they found out is they got a whole lot of male Southeast Asians there. Well, they didn't balance the control group with more females and more other, Asian or African Americans. So, like it has to be good science. So.
Yep. No, I agree. I think, I do believe though, the focus on ethics, and ethics is a loaded word, right? Word, right? When you get into, how do you know that one set of ethics is better than the other, right? When you deal with geographies where different cultures, when things that are okay in the United States may not be okay in Saudi Arabia or vice versa, right? So there's a lot of those bigger questions in there, but what it does actually shine the spotlight on is to look at things like this, simple things like bias, right? Do you have biased results, which means, hey, go back to look at your control group, your data sets to see, did you train with the right data? Are you correct? Are you overcorrecting for certain things? Now it brings as a classic data scientist, you'll start looking at it and saying, okay, I'm trying to make the best prediction here, not really, the right or the politically right prediction, if you will, right? There's those scenarios that's going to open up for sure, but it's definitely worth having a debate on.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I agree. Like our job as data scientists and AI is to provide information for people that make decisions in the easily digestible way. What you do with that information, well, that's your job is to decide. But I do think that the European Union, with the European Union president, when she put out that whole campaign, I think it's not well thought through, right? Like you're going to have people that don't understand what you and I do making decisions for us, and I think that's going to limit a lot of opportunities.
That I agree, and I think it's funny. I mean, one of my first reactions looking at the EU regulations in a cursory read was, it was actually put together in a way that the big companies with resources can really just write it off, or like either as a part of their balance sheet where they just pay the fines and move on with it, or they can just put the resources in play to go be compliant. But it really penalizes some of the smaller players who don't have that kind of resources, right? So again, back to the point, right? There is a lot of education still left to be done across the market, across all levels, and it's an emerging problem, and it's a good problem because that increases the dialogue, that increases the participation. You want to make sure it's not just one set of populists that is dictating the regulation, the policies and stuff. You want everybody to participate in it, which is what is going to lead to happen. So with that, this has been an awesome show. How can somebody connect with you if they want to? Where do they find you?
My name is Severence MacLaughlin. I'm the only Severence, I think, on LinkedIn, so put that in. And I'm at DeLorean AI, so DeLoreanAI.com, and we'd love to help you. And Ganesh, thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to having another one in the future, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Severance. This has been a blast. All right.